I'm currently working on building a custom downfiring underseat subwoofer enclosure for 3 JL Audio shallow mount 13 TW5 subwoofers. In the previous video, I did all of the woodworking to make these pieces. That process included the construction of these stacked rounded corners, which are going to match the seat in the vehicle. We also talked about the overall construction of this box and why this baffle layer here that has the subwoofer cutout holes in it has this kind of unique shape and design. In this video though, we're going to continue with our enclosure build log and do the assembly of all of these pieces and make our enclosure. Now real quick before we get started though, a big thank you to our sponsor for this episode, KnuKonceptz, along with their basic distribution blocks. The basic fused distribution blocks come in a wide variety of different sizes, but what I like about these most is how they are simple and they are very cost effective. I've used these in several different projects on the channel now. They're always reliable and easy to use. Better yet, you can use them on the positive side of your wiring with fuses, or you can also use them as a ground distribution block with these ground links. Definitely consider these for your next car audio build. If you want to learn more, check out the link down in the video description. All right, to begin our assembly process, I first want to attach these taller stacks to my baffle board. In general, I'm kind of going to make this from the bottom up. I know that I definitely want my top piece to be the last piece that I attach, and that's because we're going to need to do a router technique in order to cut the angle on the side of these rounded corners. Throughout the assembly process, when it comes to bonding 2 different surfaces together, I'm going to be using this wood glue here along with brad nails. Now I get this question quite often. The reason for the brad nails along with the wood glue is to simply clamp the connection together while the wood glue dries. If we wanted to, we could just use wood glue along with clamps and avoid the brad nails, but that would obviously take a lot longer as we would need each connection to dry before we can move on to the next one. The biggest things that I want to pay attention to while I'm doing this assembly process is I want to make sure that I always have 100% coverage of each surface with the wood glue, and I also of course want to make sure that I line up everything perfectly before applying the brad nails. Now a little tip for you guys here, we can in fact use clamps to temporarily hold our part in place, and we can shoot the brad nails at a slight angle, which will make sure that we get a really good hold between the 2 different pieces. If we used a proper amount of wood glue, we should also see some of the wood glue coming out of the seam, and we'll just want to clean that up before it dries. I've now flipped the assembly over, as you guys can see here, and I have it temporarily clamped to my work table in place, and I'm now going to repeat that same process to attach these. Remember, this is the additional rest of the stack, which allows me to have clearance for the subwoofers to be down firing towards the floor. Now that I have all of the stacked corners attached to the baffle, I'm going to attach the front of the subwoofer enclosure. I've taken a piece of scrap material and cut it to 1 3/4 inches tall, as that is the height up to the baffle. I'm just using that to temporarily support the baffle before we add all the bracing. With these more complex assemblies, I find that it's definitely a good idea to just do a quick dry fit, just of course to see how everything is going together, but also to get a feel for what surfaces you need to apply wood glue to. I'm going to need to apply it to this surface, and also the front edge of the baffle here, because all of those surfaces are going to be making contact, and I of course need to make sure that I do that on both sides. I also want to make sure that I pay attention to the length of the brad nails that I'm going to be using, because we definitely don't want them blowing out the other side, and I do also want to make sure that I pay attention to areas like this where the subwoofer cutout hole is close to this vertical board. I don't want to have to shoot a brad nail through that location and punch through the hole. So again, we repeat the process of applying all the wood glue and using the brad nailers to secure this in place, along with clamps as needed. Next up, I'm applying the side pieces, making sure that I have that little notch pointing towards the back side that does allow for some clearance in the vehicle. And again, we're just using wood glue on every mating surface and then clamps as needed and brad nailing this into place. Now we are definitely making some progress. So next up, we are going to add our window bracing. Off camera, I did take the time to measure out and mark where the side of each of these braces should go, along with also marking out this vertical surface here. Oh yeah, real quick too, I also want to make sure, once again, that I double check the length of my brad nails just to make sure we don't have any blowout. So there it is, our window bracing added, and by now you guys get the idea. We're going to apply wood glue and brad nails to secure the back side in place, and I want to make sure that this angled cut on the back side perfectly matches up with this angle here, obviously before I secure the two together. I've got the subwoofer enclosure standing up on its front face right now, and I wanted to point out something really quick. If you guys did watch the woodworking process video where I made all of these pieces, you'll remember that I oversized this dimension on this back piece intentionally. The dimension from here to here, I made it about 1/16 of an inch bigger, and I did that on purpose so that this would intentionally overhang over the subwoofer baffle. And what that will allow me to do is I'll be able to take a flush trim bit on a router and zip along here with the bearing riding against this surface, and it's going to cut away this ever so slight notch, and it's going to make these two surfaces perfectly flush with one another without bothering with any sanding. Another thing I want to point out is I really take the time to make sure that I have wood glue smushed into each of these corners here, all around the inside of the enclosure and also around the braces, and that just makes sure that we have a complete bond between each of the different pieces, but also gives us some airtight properties in the corners here to make sure we don't have any air leakage. We of course do have one more face that we need to apply, and that's the top of the enclosure, and I'll be able to access the inside top of the enclosure through the subwoofer cutout holes. But there is a glaring issue here. Something is obviously going to be in the way of adding the top of our subwoofer box, and that is the extension of our stack here. We need a way to make a precise cut on here that's going to be parallel with this angled cut on the front, which matches up with this angled cut on the side. Thankfully, there is a cool router trick we can do. Now, I covered this in much more detail in a full detailed video focused just on this topic. I'll link it up in the corner of the screen, but I'll cover it really quick here for you guys as well. I learned this from my friend Sage at Sounds Good Stereo. What you can do is you can take your template piece that we use to make all of these, and we're going to template tape it to an oversized square piece of material, and we want to use a good thick piece of material. Actually, hold up. Before we template tape it, what we want to do is make a mark that is close to the edge of our template, and we're going to use a 1/4 inch drill bit to drill approximately on that mark. Now we'll take the drill bit out of the drill, and we're going to put it upside down in this hole, and this is just going to allow for some alignment because we want to make sure that we butt our template right up against that existing hole. So now I can use double-sided template tape to stick this template into position, and now we're going to use a flush trim bit on the router. This is a 1/4 inch spiral flush trim bit, and we're going to raise it out of the table so that the bearing rides against the edge of the template. While firmly holding the workpiece in position, I'm going to turn on the router and make the cutting pass. Now you might be wondering, why did we cut such a large piece of wood if we only wanted to cut this out? Well, that's because we don't actually want this. What we want is this piece of wood. You see, this shape here is a 1/4 inch larger in all dimensions than what we've originally made here, which means that it can pocket over the top like that. Now, why is this valuable though? Well, this gives us a plane or a surface that is parallel to our angled surface here, and we can ride a router along that, and using this dado bit here, what we can do is we can reach down inside of this pocket and we can machine this extra material away until we get to the same surface height as this. Now again, as it stands right now, this is still kind of sticking out and in the way, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a marker and draw a line on both the top and bottom, and then I'll use a jigsaw to do some rough cutting to remove some of that material, making sure that my blade stays between the lines. I want to be absolutely sure that my template isn't going to move while I'm doing the routering process, so I do apply some template tape along with some temporary brad nails to hold the template in place. Now again, I covered this in much more detail in the other video, but I'm using a plunge router here, and I'm going to make 3 different passes until I get to the full plunge depth, which is going to match up with the thickness of our template board. So if we take a nice close look here, now we can see that through using this template process, we are able to perfectly match that angled cut. This gives us a perfectly flat surface that the top of our enclosure can sit upon. To add the top of the enclosure, you guessed it, more wood glue and brad nails. And this time, in order to cut that outside shape, we're going to use the router. Again, we're going to rough cut, and we'll use this flush trim bit here to run along that profile, matching the shape of the box to the top of the box. I'll be adding the top of the enclosure and doing some more additional details along with some finishing techniques to give this box a finished look in the next video, so be sure to check that one out. If you're new here on this channel, we're on the journey together learning how to master car audio and how to design, build, and install our dream car audio system. I'd love to have you as a subscriber, and I always enjoy reading your comments. Don't forget, next time you need power and ground distribution for a car audio build, definitely be sure to check out our show sponsor KnuKonceptz and their basic distribution blocks. You can learn more at the link down in the video description. A big thanks to them, along with Jerry and the rest of the Patreon membership team, for making these videos possible, and thank you guys for tuning in and watching.